The Galactic Council's diplomatic chamber was a marvel of interstellar architecture, a massive geodesic dome with transparent panels that revealed the swirling nebula beyond. It's designed to inspire awe and facilitate peace among the 17 sentient species that comprised galactic civilization. Today, however, the chamber was mostly empty except for 5 senior diplomats huddled around a floating holographic display, their faces and various approximations of faces twisted with confusion. "I just don't understand it," said Ambassador Krill, his translucent tentacles twitching with agitation. "The humans have once again successfully negotiated a peace treaty with the Vorax Collective. No bloodshed, no planetary destruction, optimal trade agreements for both parties. And yet they seemed almost disappointed," finished Ambassador Thune, her iridescent scales shimmering with perplexity. The footage playing on the hologram showed the human delegation leaving the negotiation chamber. While they smiled and shook appendages with their Voraxian counterparts, the cameras caught their private moments afterward: slumped shoulders, audible sighs, and one human male actually kicking a waste receptacle while muttering, "All that preparation for nothing again." "This is the 7th time we've observed this phenomenon," noted High Counselor Kuert, whose species communicated through a combination of bioluminescent flashes and pheromones. "They work tirelessly for peace, achieve it, then act as if they've somehow failed." Ambassador Drin, a silicon-based lifeform who had been silent until now, pressed a control panel with one crystalline digit. The hologram shifted to show a timeline of Earth's admission to the Galactic Council, just 37 standard cycles ago. Humans were welcomed with caution. Drin's voice resonated through the chamber. Given their historical propensity for internal conflict, many council members predicted they would be disruptive. Instead, they've proven to be among our most effective negotiators, using tensions that have existed for millennia. It's just peculiar that they seem disappointed by their own success. The 5th figure in the room had remained silent throughout the discussion. Diplomat Zorn Vex was a veteran of interspecies relations, with over 300 cycles of experience navigating the complexities of galactic diplomacy. Unlike most Pelaxians, whose exoskeletons typically displayed muted earth tones, Zorn's had faded to a distinguished silver grey with age. His 4 primary eyes blinked in sequential thoughtfulness. "Perhaps," Zorn finally spoke, his voice a melodious rumble, "we are missing something fundamental about human psychology. Something that wouldn't appear in their official files or diplomatic briefings." High Counselor Kuert's body flashed a pattern indicating agreement. "Which is why we've summoned you, Diplomat Vex. Your experience with emerging species is unparalleled. We need you to investigate this human peculiarity, discreetly, of course." Zorn's mandibles clicked in what passed for a Pelaxian smile. "I'm honored by the assignment. I've interacted with humans before, but never in depth. This should be illuminating." "The next human delegation arrives tomorrow," Krill informed him. "They're here to negotiate mining rights in the Epsilon sector with the Droll hegemony. Both sides are historically stubborn, but the humans specifically requested the assignment." "They requested potential conflict?" Zorn asked, his antennae perking up with interest. "Indeed," Thune confirmed. "They called it a delightful challenge, as their exact words." Zorn's exoskeleton rumbled with thoughtful vibrations. "It's fascinating. I'll begin preparations immediately." As the meeting adjourned and the other diplomats filtered out, Zorn remained, watching the holographic footage loop again. The human kicking the waste receptacle, the sighs, the slumped shoulders of victory. "What are you hoping for, humans?" he whispered to the empty chamber. "What strange disappointment lurks behind your peaceful triumphs?" The answer, he suspected, would be both simpler and more complex than the Council could possibly imagine. The central docking terminal of Nexus Station buzzed with the usual cacophony of 17 different species versions of excitement. Diplomat Zorn Vex positioned himself casually beside a nutrient dispensary, his silver-grey exoskeleton helping him blend with the metallic architecture. His 4 eyes tracked the airlock where the human shuttle had just completed its docking procedures. "They're here," chirped his AI assistant, a small hovering orb named Pip. "I can see that," Zorn replied dryly, "enhanced visual on my ocular feed." The airlock cycled open with a theatrical hiss that Zorn suspected was entirely unnecessary, but added for dramatic effect something he'd noticed humans had a fondness for. Out stepped the Earth diplomatic team. Leading the group was a tall human female with dark skin and a shock of bright blue hair styled in what his cultural database identified as a mohawk. Ambassador Maxine Thundercloud, yes. That appeared to be her actual name, strode with purpose, her eyes scanning the terminal as if assessing tactical positions. Behind her came a lanky male with a perpetually twitching right eye, clutching a tablet device like it contained the secrets of the universe. According to Zorn's briefing, this was Protocol Officer Jack Nguyen, a statistical genius with an eidetic memory and apparently no social skills whatsoever. The third human was shorter but moved with military precision. Security Chief Marcus Steele had an impressive collection of scars visible, even from this distance, and wore a regulation diplomatic security uniform that somehow seemed designed to emphasize rather than conceal the weapons he wasn't technically supposed to be carrying. Rounding out the quartet was the most peculiar human of all, a round-faced individual with bright orange spectacles and wild, curly hair who bounced rather than walked, and Cultural Liaison Officer Penelope Penny. Wexler was supposedly the team's expert on interspecies communication, though she seemed to be communicating mostly in excited gasps as she pointed at various alien species. "Oh my God, Jack, that's a Zithian. They have 7 genders and communicate partially through spore emissions. And over there a Greel ambassador. Their ceremonial headdresses are actually semi-sentient symbionts." Symbionts. Numbers nodded absently, not looking up from his tablet. "Fascinating. I've calculated a 37.2% probability that the Droll representatives will employ intimidation tactics in the first round of negotiations. Ambassador. I recommend we counter with statistical projections of mutual economic benefits followed by subtle reference to Earth's military capabilities in the Rigel sector." Ambassador Thundercloud nodded. "Good work, Numbers. Steele, what's your assessment?" The security chief's eyes hadn't stopped moving since they'd entered. 3 potential choke points if things go south, standard council security protocols in effect. "I count 27 different species representatives, 8 of which have historically adversarial relationships with the Droll. It could be useful leverage." "Perfect," Thundercloud said with a smile that made Zorn's antennae twitch. It was the smile of a predator, albeit one wearing very expensive diplomatic attire. "And Penny." The Droll cultural attaché sent over their latest ceremonial greeting updates. Penny bubbled. "I've prepared dossiers on their 9 different taboos regarding personal space and the 14 acceptable conversation topics for preliminary meetings. Also, I brought snacks." She patted a small bag at her side. "Earth chocolates. Everyone loves chocolate." Zorn watched with fascination as the humans huddled together, reviewing what appeared to be complex strategic plans. Their level of preparation for a routine mining rights negotiation seemed excessive. When the Droll delegation arrived, a group of hulking reptilians with elaborate jewelry denoting their caste ranks, Zorn observed with growing curiosity as the humans transformed instantly. Ambassador Thundercloud's predatory grin became a professional smile. Numbers tucked away his tablet. Steele adopted a relaxed posture that somehow made him look even more dangerous. And Penny practically bounced forward to perform a flawless 13-step Droll greeting ritual. 3 hours later, Zorn was even more baffled. The negotiation had gone spectacularly well. Through a combination of charm, statistical analysis, subtle intimidation, and Penny's strategic deployment of chocolate, the humans had secured favorable mining terms while making the Droll feel they'd gotten the better end of the deal. It was diplomatic brilliance. And yet, as the Droll delegation departed, Zorn watched the humans deflate like punctured balloons. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Steele muttered, actually holstering a concealed weapon he hadn't needed to draw. Numbers stared forlornly at his tablet. All those contingency plans, the attack scenarios, the defensive strategies. The emergency cultural bridge-building techniques, Penny added with a sigh. Ambassador Thundercloud patted her team on their shoulders. "Good work, everyone. Another successful peaceable resolution. She tried to sound enthusiastic but couldn't quite pull it off. I guess we can cancel the war room reservation. Zorn's mandibles clicked in surprise. War room? They had reserved a war room for a mining negotiation. Perhaps, Pip whispered in his auditory canal. This assignment will be more interesting than anticipated. Zorn couldn't help but agree. The mystery had just deepened considerably. Zorn Vex had studied 17 different species' social customs during his long diplomatic career, but nothing had prepared him for the challenge of casually befriending humans. His first attempt came the following day in the station's communal recreation area, where he deliberately positioned himself near Ambassador Thundercloud, who was aggressively attacking a fitness machine. "Greetings, Ambassador," Zorn said, trying to sound casual while performing what his research suggested was a proper human greeting gesture called a wave. Unfortunately, Palaxian anatomy meant his wave looked more like a seizure. Thundercloud paused mid-punch, sweat glistening on her forehead. "Hey there, Ambassador." "Diplomat Vex," he corrected. "Zorn Vex. I'm not important enough to be an ambassador." He attempted what his facial recognition software identified as a self-deprecating smile, but his mandibles weren't cooperating. "Nonsense," Thundercloud said, grabbing a towel. "Anyone who's survived Galactic Council politics deserves a fancy title. What can I do for you, Diplomat Vex?" Zorn's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he scrambled for a plausible reason to be talking to her. "I was considering requesting Earth's assistance with a delicate matter, something that might require your unique approach." Thundercloud's entire demeanor changed instantly. "A delicate matter? Like what? Border dispute, trade negotiation gone wrong? Hostage situation?" Her eyes had lit up with an alarming intensity. "Nothing quite so dramatic," Zorn backpedaled. "Just a cultural exchange initiative. He was making this up as he went along, and not doing a very good job of it." "Oh," Thundercloud's disappointment was palpable. "Well, Penny handles most of our cultural stuff. I'm more of a crisis specialist." "You seem to have a particular expertise in crisis management," Zorn probed. The ambassador's smile returned, but different this time, fiercer. "Let's just say Earth believes in being prepared for every contingency, even the ones that never happen." "Even in diplomatic situations?" Zorn pressed. "Especially then," Thundercloud said with a wink before returning to punching the machine with renewed vigor. Zorn's next attempt at human understanding came when he cornered numbers in the data center. The human was surrounded by holographic displays showing complex statistical models. "Impressive calculations," Zorn remarked, genuinely impressed by the human's methodology. Numbers glanced up, his right eye twitching. "Thanks. I'm running simulations on 17 different negotiation outcomes based on variable draw responses." Zorn peered at one screen. "This appears to be a military engagement scenario." "Contingency planning," Numbers said without looking up. "Scenario 12B, Droll delegation reveals hidden military agenda, attempts to seize control of station systems." "That seems highly improbable," Zorn said carefully. Numbers shrugged. "Probability 0.0073%, but we have a plan for it anyway." "You have a plan for an event with less than 1/100% chance of occurring." "We have plans for everything," Numbers replied, as if this were perfectly normal. "Ambassador Thundercloud insists on it." Zorn's third attempt at human understanding came when he literally bumped into Penny in the diplomatic archives. She was buried under a stack of cultural reference materials on droll mating rituals, which went flying in all directions. "Oh my stars, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered data tablets. "The fault is entirely mine," Zorn said, helping her collect the materials. "Though I'm curious why you're researching droll reproductive behaviors for a mining rights negotiation." Penny's cheeks flushed pink. "Well, you never know when you might need to understand the cultural context of, everything. Plus, some of this might be relevant to our Plan M." "Plan M?" Mating," Penny whispered, then seemed to realize how that sounded. I mean, not that we would. That's not we just have plans for if negotiations require certain personal sacrifices. Zorn's mandibles clicked in alarm. You have plans for that? Plans are through Z plus subcategories, Penny confirmed cheerfully. We've never gotten past Plan C, though. Yeah, things keep working out peacefully before we can implement the fun ones. The next day, Zorn witnessed the humans' excitement firsthand. A minor diplomatic incident erupted when a junior droll delegate accidentally insulted a Xithian ambassador's ancestral spore patterns. The Scythian threatened to withdraw from the mining agreement, and the council chamber erupted in panicked chittering. Zorn watched as the human delegation exchanged glances that could only be described as elated. Incident Protocol Theta 7, Thundercloud whispered to her team, who responded with brisk nods. Security Chief Steele subtly shifted his stance, hand drifting toward his concealed weapon. Numbers pulled out his tablet, fingers flying across the surface. Penny began rummaging through her bag, producing what appeared to be ceremonial Xithian pollen pouches. The humans moved with practiced precision, executing a clearly rehearsed plan. Thundercloud positioned herself between the aggrieved parties, Steele created a defensive perimeter, Numbers fed real-time cultural cues to the ambassador through a discreet earpiece, and Penny performed a conciliatory spore-based ritual that left the Xithian ambassador mollified. Crisis averted in under 3 minutes. Face telling was the aftermath. The humans were practically glowing with satisfaction as they regrouped in a corner of the chamber. Nice work on the pollen offering. Penny, Thundercloud said, didn't think we'd ever use that one. I practiced it every night for 6 months, Penny replied, beaming. Zorn had never seen the humans so happy, all because a minor incident had required their intervention. The mystery was deepening, but Zorn sensed he was getting closer to understanding these strange creatures called humans. The breakthrough in Zorn's investigation came entirely by accident. 2 days after the minor diplomatic incident, he was conducting routine surveillance of the human quarters, a task he justified to himself as necessary research rather than borderline stalking. His hovering drone pip was positioned outside the common area of the human delegation's suite, transmitting audio and visual data directly to Zorn's neural implant. The humans were engaged in what appeared to be a recreational activity after their day of negotiations. They sat clustered around a large view screen, consuming various Earth snacks and beverages. Movie night. Penny announced, bouncing on her seat cushion. I've got the perfect classic for our situation. Diplomatic immunity. Shattered protocols. Oh, I love that one. Steele grunted, something that might have been a smile cracking his stoic face. The part where Ambassador Hawk has to fight his way out of the Zentaran embassy using only a ceremonial pen and a treaty document. Technically inaccurate. Numbers interjected, somehow managing to eat perfectly symmetrical bites of his snack. The tensile strength of standard treaty parchment is insufficient to garrote a Zentaran guard. It's a movie, Numbers. Thundercloud laughed, throwing a small food item at him. Besides, we all know real diplomatic work is nothing like that. It's mostly just, she sighed deeply, talking. The movie began playing, and Zorn watched in fascination as the fictional Earth diplomat on screen engaged in activities that bore absolutely no resemblance to actual diplomacy. There were explosions, hand-to-hand combat, dramatic speeches delivered while buildings collapsed in the background, romantic entanglements with alien species that would be physiologically impossible, and most puzzlingly, not a single scene of actual negotiation. This is what humans think diplomacy should be, Zorn whispered to himself. As the movie progressed, Zorn noticed something even more telling. The human diplomats weren't just enjoying the film, they were taking notes. Thundercloud muttered we should try that at a particularly improbable tactical maneuver. Members calculated the statistical probability of a diplomatic rescue operation. Penny wondered aloud if she could incorporate the film's dramatic negotiation tactics into their next meeting. When the movie ended with the hero diplomat triumphantly signing a peace treaty while bleeding from multiple wounds, the humans erupted in applause. Now that's diplomacy, Steele said wistfully. If only Thundercloud agreed. Instead, we prepare for all these amazing scenarios, and then everyone just agrees to be reasonable. The simulations are my favorite part, Numbers admitted. I've run 347 different crisis scenarios for this mission alone. Remember that time on Proxima IV when we almost got to use the emergency evacuation plan? Penny sighed. I was so excited to deploy the smoke bombs. I had my combat staff assembled and everything, Steele added. But then they just worked it out. That's the problem with being good at our jobs, Thundercloud lamented. We prevent the very crises we're prepared for. Zorn's mandibles clicked in sudden understanding. The humans weren't disappointed by peace, they were disappointed by not getting to use their elaborate preparations. They didn't want actual conflict. They wanted adventure. The next day, Zorn made his move. He cornered Ambassador Thundercloud in a secluded garden area of the station. Ambassador, I believe I understand your predicament, Zorn began without preamble. Thundercloud raised an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I had a predicament, Diplomat Vex. The disappointment when peace prevails, Zorn said, the elaborate preparations for crises that never materialize. The movie nights. The ambassador's eyes narrowed. You've been watching us. Observing, Zorn corrected. It's my job, and I've observed something fascinating about humans. You're not warmongers, you're adventure seekers. Thundercloud's defensive posture relaxed slightly. Are you saying you understand why we seem disappointed when negotiations go smoothly? You don't want actual conflict, Zorn said. You want to use the skills you've honed, the plans you've crafted. You want the thrill of the diplomatic hunt without the actual casualties. For a moment, the ambassador was silent, then a slow smile spread across her face. Well, looks like someone finally gets it. So let me get this straight, Thundercloud said, leaning against a bioluminescent plant that pulsed in response to her proximity. You've been investigating us because the Council is concerned about our disappointment. Zorn's exoskeleton shifted in what passed for a Palaxian shrug. Your negotiation tactics are unparalleled. Your success rate is impressive. But your reactions to those successes have been perplexing. And you've figured it out, she said, crossing her arms. That we're a bunch of adventure junkies stuck in boring diplomatic jobs. Not exactly, Zorn corrected. You're excellent diplomats precisely because you prepare for every possible scenario, including the exciting ones that never materialize. The problem isn't that you're in the wrong profession, it's that your profession never lets you use your full capabilities. Thundercloud sighed, dropping the diplomatic facade. Do you know how many extraction plans Steele has devised for this mission alone? 17. One involves rappelling down the central atrium using makeshift gear constructed from ceremonial banners. And the probability of needing such a plan? 0.0014%, according to numbers, she admitted. But we have it ready. Just like we have plans for hostage situations, coup attempts, sudden declaration of war, revelation of secret plots, you name it. And then everyone agrees to reasonable terms, signs the documents, and goes home happy, Zorn finished. Exactly. Thundercloud threw up her hands. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad we avoid interstellar incidents, but sometimes I just wish that you could experience the scenarios you've prepared for without actual diplomatic catastrophe, Zorn said. Yes. The ambassador's eyes lit up. That's exactly it. Zorn's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, his gesture of deep thought. What if you could? 3 hours later, a bewildered council technician was being briefed on a new project by diplomat Zorn Vex and the entire human delegation. Let me understand, the technician said, her tentacles twitching with confusion. You want to repurpose our tactical simulation chamber to run diplomatic crisis scenarios for fun. It's for training purposes, Zorn corrected smoothly, with explosions. The technician asked, looking at the specifications Steele had provided. Simulated explosions, Thundercloud clarified, are completely harmless. And the combat sequences? Fatal diplomatic skills, Penny insisted with a straight face. and the romantic subplot options. The technician's eye stalks swiveled toward Numbers, who was studiously avoiding eye contact. "A comprehensive scenario modeling," he mumbled. Despite the technician's reservations, the project was approved with remarkable speed. Zorn's reputation and the human's enthusiasm, plus a judicious application of Earth chocolate, overcame any bureaucratic obstacles. 2 weeks later, Diplomatic Crisis Simulator 1.0 was unveiled. The simulator was an instant hit with the human delegation. The first scenario droll delegation reveals secret alliance with pirates had Thundercloud and her team working through a complex hostage negotiation that culminated in Steel leaping across a chasm of simulated lava to rescue an ambassador while Numbers hacked into a boat security system, and Penny created a cultural distraction involving ritual dance. None of it was remotely realistic, but the humans emerged sweaty, laughing, and more satisfied than Zorn had ever seen them. "That was amazing," Penny exclaimed, her curly hair wild from the simulated wind effects. Especially when the droll High Commander revealed himself to be 3 Zithians in a trench coat. Statistically improbable, Numbers noted with what might have been a smile, but highly entertaining. The truly unexpected development came when word spread to other diplomatic teams. First came the Zithians, curious about this strange human recreational activity. Then the Greel requested access. Even a junior droll diplomat sheepishly asked if they could participate. Within a month, What If War, Diplomatic Edition had become the most popular recreation activity on the station. Diplomatic teams that had been coldly formal with each other for centuries were now enthusiastically role-playing elaborate crisis scenarios together, forming unlikely alliances to overcome simulated threats. "I never expected this level of popularity," Zorn admitted to Thundercloud as they watched a mixed-species team tackle Scenario 47. Mysterious quantum anomaly causes language translators to reverse meaning. "Really? You underestimated how boring diplomatic work is for everyone," she laughed. "Turns out humans aren't the only ones who prepare for exciting scenarios that never happen. We're just the only ones who admitted we were disappointed." 6 months after its inception, What If War, Diplomatic Edition had transformed interspecies relations across the Galactic Council. A follow-up report prepared by Zorn Vex for the Senior Council stood as testament to its unexpected success. "The simulator has become more than a recreational outlet," Zorn explained to the assembled council elders. "It's now a legitimate diplomatic tool. Species with historical grievances work through fictional conflicts together, building real trust that carries over to actual negotiations." The holographic display showed statistics that even Numbers would approve of: diplomatic incidents down 43%, successful treaty negotiations up 27%, and reported job satisfaction among diplomatic corps across all species increased by a stunning 78%. "And the humans?" High Counselor Quirt asked, body flashing with curious patterns. "See for yourself," Zorn said, switching the display to a live feed. Ambassador Thundercloud and her team were now conducting a training session for a mixed group of diplomatic novices, representing 12 different species. The current scenario hostile takeover of Council headquarters by rogue AI had Thundercloud dramatically wedged in a maintenance shaft, coaching a nervous young droll through disarming a simulated explosive. "The humans have found their perfect role," Zorn continued. "They channel their preparation skills and adventure-seeking tendencies into creating and running scenarios that benefit everyone. They still negotiate peace treaties in real life, but now they get to experience their contingency plans as well. They seem happier," Ambassador Thune observed. "Indeed," Zorn agreed. "The simulator fulfills their need for adventure while allowing them to excel at their actual diplomatic duties. And they're not alone. It turns out many species have been harboring similar desires for excitement within the safe confines of their duties." The council members exchanged glances that suggested they understood all too well. "Your insight into human psychology has benefited the entire council," Krill acknowledged. "You've discovered something important about not just humans, but perhaps all sentient beings: the need for safe adventure, for testing oneself against challenges without actual stakes. The question remains, Ambassador Drin's crystalline voice resonated. How did you know to look for this specific trait? What made you suspect this particular solution would work? The council chamber fell silent as all attention turned to Zorn. His silver-grey exoskeleton shifted slightly in what might have been discomfort. I recognized it, he admitted finally, because I felt the same way for 200 cycles. Zorn's mandibles clicked as he continued. Every perfectly executed treaty, every smoothly negotiated agreement, while I took pride in them, a part of me always wondered, what if things had gone wrong? What if I'd needed to employ one of the 17 contingency plans I'd prepared? What if diplomatic immunity had been shattered? The council stared in shock as Zorn reached into his documentation pouch and withdrew a small data chip. This contains my personal collection of what humans call action diplomacy entertainment. I have 512 scenarios I've developed over my career. Some involve dramatic confrontations in thunderstorms. Others feature last-minute rescues using improvised diplomatic tools. One even has me swinging on a ceremonial banner to save a hostage. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ambassador Thune's scales rippled with amusement. I have 307 such scenarios myself, she confessed. In one, I dramatically reveal a hidden treaty clause while diving through an explosion. One by one, the council members admitted to their own secretly harbored diplomatic fantasies. As the confessions continued, Zorn slipped away to the simulator chamber, where the humans were now teaching a Scythian how to dramatically rip open its ceremonial robes to reveal a hidden diplomatic credential. Humans didn't bring this strange desire to the galaxy, Zorn murmured to himself as he watched. They just had the honesty to show their disappointment when they didn't get to use it. And in doing so, they freed the rest of us to admit what we've always known. He smiled a Palaxian smile. Diplomacy works best when it's boring, but diplomats, it seems, do not.